Welcome to the first video in a series that I am calling Wise Words. This video series is going to be digging into some of the things that I have been researching recently, but also that I have been praying about and reflecting on for the past weeks, months, and years. Because I feel like as I have watched the church, and it just seems to be growing, I feel like I'm watching Christians eat each other alive. And this is something, it breaks my heart, and I'm incredibly concerned. As someone who speaks for a living, whether it's in words that I speak out loud or it's in the words that I write, I'm very conscious of the need to be careful in what I say. That's not to say that I always get it right. I often don't. But it's made me very conscious of that. I think social media can sometimes exacerbate the issue because we all think everyone has a right to hear what I say, or at least I have a right to say what I think. And it could be on issues of politics. It could be issues that are internal debates in the church, whether it's on race or gender or women in ministry, whatever the hot topic is in your denomination. How are we talking with one another? How are we talking about one another? Jesus said that the world would know that we were his disciples by the love that we have for one another. Are we loving each other well with our words? Yes, we have to love each other well indeed. So please don't think I'm saying it's all about our words. I'm not. But our words do matter. And when our words and our actions don't cohere, when they don't come together, that's when we get accused of hypocrisy. And the love is unreal. As I've reflected on these issues, I've been digging a lot into the books of James and Proverbs because there's so much on speech in both of them. But I have a number of questions, and I've written some of them down because I wanted to make sure that I have them all here for you. But one of them is our speech, is my speech, is it honoring God? Or is it honoring myself? Or honoring the people that I think need to be honored? Is it building up God's people? Is our speech demonstrating Jesus' love? Bottom line, does the way that we are using our words show the world what God looks like and who he is? Or as Carmen Imes would put it, are we bearing God's name well in the way that we speak? I don't have all the answers on this, but I've started writing an essay on this very topic, and it's an exploration of James and Proverbs in conversation. And as I'm pulling all of this together, I wanted to start sharing some of my thoughts with you. But I want to go further than sharing my thoughts with you. I want to hear what questions you have. What are you wondering? What have you been thinking? How have you been reacting to the way that we talk to one another or about one another? Because I'd like to start incorporating some of that into both my, perhaps my writing or these videos or my own thinking and prayer life. Because the verse that keeps coming to mind, that the Lord brings to mind as I pray over these issues, it's a phrase out of James 1. And it's in verse 19 where he says, be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry. And I keep reflecting on that. And I want to listen to what others are saying. And I do that in part in conversations with friends. And I do that in part by reading what other scholars or what pastors or others have written. But also I would love to hear your questions and your thoughts as well. But I'd like to pause before I wrap up today, just as we get started, and read to you as this wider passage. Because as I've started digging into writing this essay, the first thing I did was I went and I outlined all the speech in the book of James. And so I want to share a little bit about what I've been reflecting on. So starting in verse 19, my dear brothers and sisters, take note of this. Everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry. So that phrase. Because human anger does not produce the righteousness that God desires. Therefore, get rid of all moral filth and the evil that is so prevalent, and humbly accept the word planted in you, which can save you. That word planted in us, in order for it to be planted, we have to have heard, we have to have listened. And so this ties back to the idea of listening. But we see here this theme of anger, and anger not producing the righteousness that God desires. Are our words promoting peace and well-being, or are they promoting anger? I am not saying that there is not a place for our words to speak hard truths to people around us or to people in power. But looking at our goals, I think, does matter. Is it rooted out of love and concern? Or is it rooted in our own desire to create? Is it rooted in our own desire for power and influence? What are our motives? This passage goes on, and at the end of this section, in verse 27, it says, religion that God our Father accepts as pure and faultless is this: to look after orphans and widows in their distress, and to keep oneself from being polluted by the world. In the New Testament period, the widows and the orphans would have been the most marginalized. They would have been at-risk individuals. Who are those at-risk people in our society? How do we talk about them? How do we talk about their needs? How does our concern for them match our actions? And do we use our words to speak perhaps on their behalf if they do not have a voice? That's something that we'll get at in the coming weeks as we dig into Proverbs in conversation with James. But in order to speak for them, we first have to hear them. Who are we listening to? So I guess as I come to the end of this, I would like to ask two things. One, I'd like to ask for your input. I'd love to know what you think, as I've said. But also, maybe we can all be praying. Is our speech being more influenced by the world and the culture around us, or is it being influenced by what Christ is doing in our lives, how the Spirit is working in our lives, and what God teaches us through His Word? This is an area that is incredibly important and valuable, but it's also a touchy one. And so please know that this is an area that I don't have it all figured out, and I'm not going to get it all right. But I'm looking forward to learning and walking with you on this journey. And maybe together we can all come together and use our words more wisely to honor and serve the Lord.